If you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see something called question and answer. If you type the questions in there, we've got two people online today, Deborah and Caroline, who are going to do their best to try to answer your questions. Any questions that are quite general and we see coming up a lot, we'll try to deal with at the end so that everybody hears the answers to those. And if we don't get to deal with all of the questions, we'll come back to you afterwards with responses. There may be some that we need to explore the answers to if they're a little bit more complicated. Don't use the chat function, please. It's better to use that question and answer function because that is being monitored throughout today's event. In order to see this in the best way possible, I'm also going to ask that you have your speaker view mode on, which you can toggle in the right-hand corner of your screen. We have a few of my colleagues joining us here today who might be able to help out with some of the questions as we go through as well. So they are Associate Professor David Tibbety, who's our Head of Teaching and Learning, but also our Associate Dean in the College of Engineering and Architecture, Dr. Neil Murphy, who is the Stage 1 Director, Programme Director for Engineering, so obviously has a very good knowledge of what's happening in first year. And we also have Dr. Julia Marr, who is our Engineering Student Advisor, and Julia is going to have a few words to speak to you about as well, about what's happening with your sons and daughters this year. And as I said, we've got Caroline and Deborah who are going to be answering the question and answers on the question and answer function. So welcome to the event for parents and guardians of Stage 1 engineering students. Normally, we don't have an event like this, a lunchtime event online. Normally, the way we run this event is in the evening time in the engineering building, and we invite parents and guardians to come in to hear the talk that I'm going to give you, but then also to meet other academics. And unfortunately, given the way things are at the moment, we're not able to do that this year. And I know that means that this may not be the way you'd normally experience this event, but we are going to try to do everything we can to give you the same information that you'd normally get at that, and we're also available to follow up on any kind of questions you might have afterwards. And as I said, this is all recorded, so in some ways there are advantages to this year because you will be able to look back at this presentation again in the future. So what we're doing, it's an opportunity here to learn a little bit more about life as a UCD engineering student and about careers for graduate engineers. And one of the things I think I'd like to emphasize as well is that there will be life after COVID. So it's very important that we give you information about what's going to happen to your students, to your children when they're in engineering, when this year is over and we're back into a more normal situation. So that's me. I'm Professor Eva Hearn, the Dean of Engineering and the Principal of College of Engineering and Architecture. I'm going to give an introduction to engineering, to the programme pathways and careers. And following that, we are going to have, sorry, my slides are after stopping. Dr. Julia Marr, who's our college, who will talk to you about the college and university supports that are available in UCD. And then Deborah and Caroline are here as well doing the question and answers. So what's different this year? We're going to start off a little bit telling you about what's different and then move on to give you the more normal presentation about what engineering in UCD is like. So obviously what's different this year is that much of the teaching is online through Brightspace, which is the virtual learning environments that we use in UCD. And even when the students come back onto campus, they will continue to use Brightspace. It's the learning environments that we use to deliver them their notes, to engage in online teaching, etc. So even when they are back on campus, they'll continue to use Brightspace. But this year, they're obviously using it more than normal because our lectures are being delivered in that way this year as well. In engineering, we are lucky that there are some on-campus activities with the practicals and laboratories and some small group tutorials as well. Originally, at the start of this year, our hope was to have an awful lot more face-to-face teaching, and that's what we had been planning for right up until about 3 days before the trimester started, when universities were instructed and higher education institutes were instructed to move to a level 4 situation in advance of the rest of the country, and we're told that we couldn't have as much face-to-face interaction. But we are hopeful that that might change in the future and that we might be able to do more face-to-face if the situation improves. In order to facilitate students who are on campus and engaging in practicals and laboratories, there are bookable study spaces available around the campus, which means that if a student is in doing a lab and then needs to wait around campus for something else happening later on or wants to study, they can book those study spaces. They're in the libraries, there are also lecture theatres, etc., that are dedicated study spaces. In addition, we also, as some of you will know, have a lot of students living on campus. So our residents and our facilities are open, and we've got a lot of students who are here from abroad living on campus as well. And obviously they have to be looked after, because university, while campuses may be closed for a lot of face-to-face teaching, our universities are still communities and home places for an awful lot of our students. And catering is continuing, obviously takeaway for the most part. Our student health centre is continuing, and the gym was open, though I think at this stage it is now closed because of level 5 restrictions, but it was open until those level 5 restrictions were put in place. There's a lot of supports available around COVID-19 as well. So there are frequently asked questions online. I really would urge the students to look at those, and for you yourself to look at those, because they get updated quite frequently. When things change at a national level, we need to change those as well. So it's worthwhile having a look at that. There's also information about what's happening on campus in terms of teaching. And we also have campus amenities and supports available there for students if they're having any difficulties, or if there's anything they need to find out more information about. So the links are all available in this presentation, which you can look at afterwards as well. In terms of the rules around campus, obviously, given what's happening, there's a reasonably high level of personal responsibility for students and for staff around the campus when they're using the campus. And those people who've been in on campus will tell you that we have a lot of new equipment put in place to ensure that everybody's safe. And we have a lot of signage around the place in terms of where people are allowed to sit, with much bigger spaces in lecture theatres to ensure that there's appropriate social distancing in those lecture theatres, and wearing a PPE, etc. in labs when appropriate. And one of the rules that we have in the university is that face coverings are mandatory for all teaching and learning events in all the libraries and internal public spaces of the campus, for students, but also for faculty, for staff, for community, and for visitors to UCD. Okay, there's also a short guide for students returning to campus, and that again, all students should have gotten a copy of that and should look at that. It tells them what their responsibilities are around about coronavirus and what they're meant to be doing when they're on campus, and also what are the impacts of this for student life, for student services, and where those services are in these very unusual times. Okay, so moving away from looking at that and talking a little bit more generally about UCD and engineering, and what the students can hope to experience both this year and as they go forward on into the engineering programme. So UCD is a very large university with 33,900 students, and the UCD College of Engineering and Architecture is quite a large college as well, comprising both engineering and architecture programmes. We're called a college, so within the university is divided up into a number of colleges which look after different disciplines, and the College of Engineering and Architecture is where your students find themselves. Within that, we have a programme board who look after all the aspects of the programmes that different students are taking, including the engineering programme, and a college office where, for example, Caroline and Deborah, who are online here today, work, and where we have administrators and support staff there to help the students through their programme. Then within the college, we're also divided up into a number of schools, and these are the schools that look after each of the different engineering disciplines. So engineering is spread out over a number of different buildings across the campus. The first building that you can see there is the Engineering and Material Science building, and that's where we would normally host this event in more normal times. But we also have other offices and laboratory spaces in the science building, and over in Newstead as well, which is the far side of the campus. And Ag and Food Science Centre, we also have some facilities there as well. Another part of the college that students often want to engage with is the Sports Centre, which is in the middle of the buildings that we have here. So engineering and architecture includes 6 schools. The first one, the School of Architecture, Planning and Environmental Policy, is our non-engineering school within the college, but the rest are the engineering schools, are the ones that your children will be most likely to be engaging with over the coming years. So we have a School of Biosystems and Food Engineering, a School of Chemical and Bioprocess Engineering, a School of Civil Engineering, and a School of Electrical and Electronic Engineering, and a School of Mechanical and Materials Engineering. And UCD has the greatest diversity of engineering programs and disciplines in the country available for the students. So just reminding you of those buildings again, as I said, Engineering and Materials Science Centre is where most of our engineering schools are, and it's probably where we have our biggest presence, but we also have a presence in the Agricultural and Food Centre, which is where Biosystems and Food Engineering is based, and out in Newstead, which is at the Clonskee side of the university, which is where civil and structural engineering are based, and the laboratories for civil and structural engineering are based there as well. So what will the students experience, or what are they currently experiencing as engineers undergoing an engineering education? So generally what we're talking about with engineers is that they must learn to apply scientific and mathematical principles to solve problems faced by mankind. And that's something we really try to emphasize with the students when they're here, that they are learning mathematical and scientific principles, that those principles are very important. They're the fundamentals of what they need to know. But the reason that they're doing that is to look at how to solve problems. And engineers, whether they're civil engineers, electronic engineers, whatever, they are always involved in trying to solve problems and create a better future for mankind. So they need to be educated to be able to identify the problems of today, but also to think about what are the potential problems that we might have tomorrow, and how can we look at solving those as well. So engineers aim to improve quality of life in a way that is sustainable. And even if we think about the current situation at the moment with COVID, there are many people in UCD, many researchers and faculty in UCD in the engineering college who are involved in work and research around looking at what we can do to cope with that. In chemical engineering, looking at vaccines, etc., but also in mechanical engineering, looking at how this virus spreads through sneezing and coughing, and what are the kinds of things that we need to do around ventilation, masks, etc., to protect ourselves. So we look at the grand challenges facing mankind, the ever-increasing consumption needs of billions of people and growing populations, energy supply and climate change, obviously extremely big topics nowadays, and every one of the disciplines in engineering is looking at these areas and is involved in these areas. Drinking water supply, flood control, obviously again very topical in an Irish context in particular. As we go into the winter, we're going to be seeing an awful lot more flooding, etc. We'll have news stories talking about how do we look at flood defences, again something engineers are involved in. Food supply, a safe food supply, a sustainable food supply, and improving quality of life for an ageing population as well. What can we do around design, etc., to make it inclusive, to ensure that we look after all types of people? Engineers need to use science and mathematics in their thinking. So while they're looking at solving these problems, engineers need to make those decisions and to come up with solutions that are evidence-based and use those fundamental aspects of science and mathematics. Their analytical thinking is framed by and used in the service of practical ends. And the engineer also, however, apart from just being very mathematical and scientific and analytical, a part that's sometimes neglected or overlooked in engineering is that we need our engineers to be creative and to exhibit leadership. And that's really important if we think of them looking at solving future problems and the problems of mankind. Solving those problems can only come about through creativity and being able to think about things a little bit differently, and also by being able to exhibit the leadership that we need from professionals, from experts, from scientists, and from engineers to be able to bring people to those solutions. So the abilities and attributes of graduate engineers are technical understanding. So we need them to understand those disciplinary fundamentals. As you know already from your children who have come into first year engineering, they need to have a good grasp of maths. And most people we see doing engineering enjoyed maths and had that very good grasp of mathematics through their second level education. Creativity and innovation, as I said, an aspect that's often overlooked in engineering, but is of equal importance with that mathematical and scientific ability as well. And the ability to apply theory and practice, to be able to take what they've learned and use it to come up with practical solutions. In addition to that technical side, we also need our students more and more, and our engineers more and more, to be able to work in a business environment, to be good communicators, to be able to lead, but also to be able to be members of a team and work with lots of other disciplines as well, because engineers rarely work on their own and will often be working with members of other professions, with other types of backgrounds. And a business awareness of the implication of engineering decisions and investments. As many of you will probably know, engineers don't always end up working in engineering, but often end up working in decision-making roles, as managers, as business leaders. So we need to ensure that they come out with the right skills for those areas as well. Now your students are already here in engineering, so you know how they got here, but once they're here, what do they do? Well, they all come into a common first year. What I mean by that is that we don't expect them to have made a choice in first year, unlike some other universities where students will have already made a choice when they come into first year. And the benefit and advantage of that is that a 17 or an 18-year-old, it's very difficult for them to know what type of engineering they want to do without ever having experienced it. So in stage one, we give them opportunities to try out, to learn about, to experience all types of engineering. At the end of stage one, or towards the end of stage one, those students start to make decisions about where they want to go next. And we don't have any quotas on that. So they can go into whichever discipline they want. We don't look at grades, etc., to make those decisions. And the only time there would ever be a limitation would be safety related. And by that I mean, if we had a laboratory that couldn't take a certain number of students, there might be a need to look at numbers. But that generally doesn't happen, and students can do the programs that they want to do. You'll find soon that some of the students will be getting, or all of the students will be getting discipline talks, which is they will be getting talks from all the different parts of engineering to talk to them a little bit more about what that might mean if they were to choose that discipline. There's other points where they need to make decisions as well, in addition to choosing the discipline they want, but also what kind of level they want to do this discipline at. Do they want to use it? Do they want to finish on a bachelor's or a master's? And what kind of specialization do they want to do once they get into a particular discipline? So the first point where they will have to make a decision about whether they stay in UCD or whether they decide to leave is after 3 years. They can decide to leave UCD with what we call a BSc, which is a degree in engineering science. And they can either go on to another European university to complete their education, to specialise further, or sometimes they go on to other careers or to do other things with that BSc. If they decide to stay with us, they have other points where they need to make a decision. They may graduate after 4 years, which would be a BE degree or a Bachelor's of Engineering, which is no longer solely sufficient for Chartered Engineer status. Now, it is possible to become a Chartered Engineer with a BE, but you need to do additional learning on top of that. Most of our students would stay with us for the 5 years. And if they stay with us for the 5 years, they will graduate with both a BSc, which is the Bachelor of Science, as I said, and an ME, which is the Masters of Engineering. And that Masters enables them to become chartered. And it's very important now at this stage to let you know, and I'm sure some of you already know this, that because they're going into the master's program, when they are in 5th year, there are tuition fees for all students in their final year if they decide to stay on for the ME. So just that kind of gives you in a graphical form exactly what I've just said in terms of what they can do. That they've come into us now here in 2020. They will finish up stage 1 in 2021 and move into whatever discipline they've chosen. Those who want to leave us with a BE will graduate in September 2024. Those who decide to take the ME route will be graduating in September 2025. So stage 1, what are the kind of things they do? Well, stage 1 is quite general. And as I said, that's because they're learning and trying out all the different types of disciplines and getting to experience different disciplines. We also in stage 1 have a very important task to fulfill, and that is to ensure that all students are finishing that first stage at the same level. So we have students coming into us from all across the country, from all around the world as well, so not just Irish students coming into stage 1, and they have different levels of experience in physics or chemistry. Some students will have done physics, some will have done chemistry, some will have done both. And so we really need in that year to use the year to make sure that they all come up to that same level by the time we get to May. So you'll see quite a heavy emphasis on the fundamentals, the basics in stage 1. But in addition to that, they do get to try out different types of engineering programs and different types of engineering modules in stage 1 as well. As they go into stage 2, this is when they make their choice about what they're going to do next. Is it biomedical, chemical and bioprocess, civil, electrical or electronic, mechanical, and structural engineering with architecture? And then as you can see, when they go into stage 4, to years 4 and 5, things start to get even more complicated and there are more and more options. But basically what you're doing with all of these options is each time you make a choice, you are specializing and going more and more deeply into a particular topic. So you go from a wide breadth of knowledge down to a more deep, specified, specialized type of knowledge as you move through the 5-year program. The kind of options, as you can see, there's quite a diverse range of options here, from the ones that we probably are all aware of, like civil, mechanical, etc., to more unusual ones like engineering with business, biomedical engineering, which is hugely popular nowadays, structural engineering with architecture. So we have a lot of different disciplines available. So again, if you look at these, the list that I'm going to show you here, what it shows you is not just those disciplines, but also at what level those different disciplines are offered at, whether it's BE or ME or both in some cases. Okay. And as you can see, we've got 7 at BE level, 1 at BSc and 12 MEs. Where did our students go last year? This graph shows you where they go. Our biggest school, which tends to attract the highest number of students, is mechanical engineering, followed by electrical engineering. Civil structural has about 11%, 15% in chemical and bioprocess, and 12% in our biomedical engineering degree, which is growing all the time as well. Okay, so all UCD programs are made up of modules in different subject areas. So when students are taking subjects, they take this is the unit or the core unit that they will be taking in each time. And the module is where they will do their assessment or their exams at the end of each trimester. An engineering course normally involves 12 modules per stage, or if you wanted to talk about that in terms of easier language, what year they're in. So they're in stage 1 or their first year, and they'll have 12 modules in that stage. 5 credits, so every module is usually worth 5 credits. So each year or stage is worth 60 credits to the student. And modules are classified under one of 3 terms: core, option, or elective. So every module, what the students will be able to see in Brightspace is a module descriptor telling them what the module is about, and it will tell them what the learning outcomes are. And the learning outcomes are what they should have achieved at the end of that module, what they're working towards under that module. And that will be under areas of knowledge, understanding, intellectual abilities, practical skills, and general transferable skills. So I think what I would say when you're looking at a module, it's not just what you understand or know at the end of the module when you're looking at university modules, but also how you learned it. What kind of new skills did you build up in gaining that knowledge as well? So that might make it a little bit different to what people have experienced at second level. That it's not just the knowledge that's important, it's all the skills and the how you learned that's really important as well. And the learning is the student's responsibility. So what we do is we provide the teaching, we give them the information, we provide them with the tools and the equipment that they need to get that information, to do the laboratories, to practice, but they need to do the learning themselves. And there's an awful lot more responsibility on students once they get to third level to engage in that learning. And as they move through the program, move up through stages, that emphasis on their own learning and their own independent learning becomes greater and greater. I've already talked to you a little bit about the stage 1 modules and what happens. As you can see, there's quite a lot of emphasis on the mathematical, the physics, the science skills that they need to learn. And they don't do any electives in the first trimester. You'll see me, I'll talk about trimesters a bit. Trimesters are terms, or what we would, and there are 3 trimesters that the students might engage in, but these students will have 2 trimesters, the first trimester that they're in the middle of now, running up to Christmas, and the second trimester, which runs up to May. The university has a 3rd trimester, which is a summer trimester for students here, for example, working over a 12-month program. But for your students, it's 2 trimesters. That first trimester, they have no elective modules. Every student is doing the same thing, and every student has the same modules. In the second trimester, for the first time, they start to have choices. So they will do 4 core modules, which everybody is doing. And then afterwards, they start to pick options. And they can pick an option from a list of 4 modules there. And then they can also take 1 free elective. And that elective can be taken from options within engineering, but it could also be taken from options outside of engineering. So for example, if a student wants to take a language elective or something like that instead, they can start to do that from trimester 2, so after Christmas this year. Exam dates and assessment. Generally speaking, you will see students will have a combination of different types of exams. They'll have continuous assessment, which is where they will do work during a year, and then exams at the end of the year. Or at the end of each trimester. This is a little bit different this year. There's a greater emphasis on continuous assessment. I think it would be true to say of most modules, and that's because of not being able to bring students together in quite as large a number as normal for end of trimester exams and assessments. So all the modules over the trimester will have continuous assessment. That could be assignments, it could be group work, it could be multiple choice questions, in-class tests, lab practicals, and writing reports for those lab practicals. At the end of the autumn trimester, there's usually an exam, And this year the exams will take place between the 14th of December right up to just before Christmas, which is Friday the 23rd of December. And exams at the end of the spring trimester, again, they have, what's a little bit different about the spring trimester to the Christmas trimester is that there is a break in the middle. That's not a break to go on holidays, but a break to actually engage in field work and study work, etc. There's a revision week, and then we've got exams running from the 4th of May to the 15th of May. What happens if a student fails an exam? Usually they can take what we call a resit exam, which usually happens at the end of the next trimester. There, they have to do that exam, though, at the same time as doing their 6 new modules. So they'll have moved into their new trimester, they'll have started 6 new modules, and then they will be taking this other module that they will have failed as an exam at the end of the trimester. So when you do fail a module, it can be it's a heavier workload is going to be facing that student in the next trimester. Autumn trimester exams are always in December, and spring trimester exams are in May. And we don't have repeat exams. We don't run autumn repeat exams during the summer. What happens is you take your exam at the end of the following trimester. So if you fail an exam this Christmas, it will be at the end of May, or at the end of the next trimester in May, that you would have the opportunity to resit that exam. And equally, if you failed an exam in May, you would have to wait until Christmas time to resit that exam. So all the components of assessment of a module are combined to produce a grade. And what students get is something called a grade point. So if they get a grade, the grades translate into different grade points. And we also have a verbal description of what that means, or what a different grade means. To think about the older way of what this means, how does a grade point average translate into the more traditional form of language that we're all used to with universities? A grade point average of over 3.68 is a first class honours in the old system. 3.08 to 3.67 is a second class grade 1, 2.48 to 3.07 second class grade 2, and 2.0 to 2.47 is a pass. And the UCD Engineering Bachelor degree honours classification is based on a weighted calculation. So that means that it's not all on the work that you do in your last year, your last stage. 70% of your grade will come from the final year that you're in, whereas 30% will have come from the previous year. And we do emphasise that to students the whole way through, that it's extremely important to consistently work and not just leave everything until the very end, because unlike in secondary school, there is a weighting, or there is importance on both of the last 2 years of your programme. So what are the kind of opportunities that students can engage in as well? Well, we have a lot of opportunities to study abroad for our students, and that's available in stage 2 and stage 3. There are some minimum requirements around the kind of grade point averages that students need to have. They need to be doing well, and that's because when they go to these other universities, there's obviously challenges in terms of socialization, etc., going to a different university. So you need to ensure that you're going to be able to be on top of the academic side of it going to these universities as well. And we have a lot of different partner universities where our students go to in the US, Europe, Australia, Canada, and in China and Singapore, we've had students go on exchange as well. We also get quite a lot of students from these universities into UCD, and it's usually in stage 3 that our students go out to these different universities for study abroad. In the NE, so if the student decides to stay with us for 5 years, they will also get an opportunity to engage in an internship, and that's called a professional work experience. It's a module, so they get graded on this module, and it counts towards their final degree. And what it's meant to do is to help the students experience full-time practical work within the area or within the industry that they actually want to work in. And the way the assignment is done is they have written assignments, they have to do a diary, they have to do a report, but we also get their employer to assess them and to tell us how they're getting on. And the internship can vary from a short internship of 3 months, but more commonly, most students go out in an 8-month internship, which starts in January and runs until September. So they would take the whole of the second trimester plus the summer out on internship. What happens is around about now, in that first trimester, the students are matched up with different industries who come in to talk to us and are interviewed in order to find the internship. And we have 2 full-time intern managers in the college who work very hard to match up students and to help students get those internships. And it's something that I think most students hugely value and is one of the most positive experiences I think they have. And we've very, very good links and very, very good relationships built up with some really excellent engineering companies and non-engineering companies. And all of those you can see on the slide here have taken ME students on internships over the last few years. And even during COVID, many of these companies still continue to take the students on for their internships as well. After graduation, where do students go? Well, they can go directly into employment in companies in Ireland and overseas. A lot of the world's leading companies have very significant operations in Ireland, especially in the tech sector and the biomed sector. And starting salaries for engineers tend to be extremely high. They vary between disciplines, but in engineering in general, the starting salaries are very high. Some students decide that they want to stay in academia and want to undertake further studies, and they go on to do higher degrees. For example, doctoral work either in UCD or elsewhere in research. And the opportunities for employment in engineering are extremely high across all of the disciplines. So in energy, healthcare, environment, these are key priorities from an economic perspective, from a strategic perspective from government. And so there are an awful lot of opportunities for engineers there. Ireland has an extremely strong industrial sector in bioengineering and biopharma, one of the strongest in the world. And again, people in those disciplines find jobs very, very easily, very highly paid jobs very easily. And we also have a very strong presence in the tech and software and communications area. Civil engineering and the agri-food sectors are growing. There's an awful lot of investment in infrastructure and construction at the moment around Ireland as well. So we have a huge amount of employment available for people there as well. And we've got export-led healthcare and technology sectors. So basically in engineering, there are a huge amount of opportunities for students. But in addition to that, the opportunities for engineering graduates in other sectors are also huge. And we see an awful lot of engineering graduates being very much in demand by the finance sector and by consultancy sectors as well, who value the analytical, the numerous, the problem-based, the problem-solving skills that we try to give them while they're here in UCD. So the kind of employers that you see taking on students from UCD, and all of these companies have taken on students graduating in UCD in the last few years, and you'll see they range from the traditional engineering companies to maybe companies that you might not have expected to see there, like finance companies, etc. And our graduates will work in both the private and the public sector when they graduate as well. So huge employment opportunities. So I'm going to hand over to Julia now, who's going to give you a little bit of a talk about the supports available to students here.
Thank you, Aoife. As Aoife said, my name is Dr. Julia Marr. I am the student advisor for students studying engineering and architecture, and I'm going to talk you through the supports available from student advisor from the university and college. Sorry, next slide. Thanks, Aoife. Okay, so I suppose just to start and to say, I'm very conscious that this year has probably been very unusual for you, for your student, for your young adult. I'm very conscious of that. And I suppose as I go through the slides, that's something that I might touch on from time to time, but certainly I'm very, I suppose, cognizant of that, and that my door is always open to support students in whatever they might face. So please do send them my way if they'd like to have a chat about any one of the things that I bring up today. So why might a student contact a student advisor? I can answer practical questions for students. Sometimes a student has a question that needs an answer and they're not quite sure where to go. If it's not something that I can answer, I might refer them on to colleagues in the college office or say the student desk. A student might come and talk to me about personal difficulties. So it may be that they just need a listening ear, or it might be what they're going through has an impact on their academic life and their study and how they engage in their course. So we might have a chat about what can be done to support them through that difficulty. Students can come and talk to me about academic difficulties, academic queries. We can talk about study skills, how they might manage the transition to university, what they've been going through, or I may refer them back to talk to their module coordinator if it's something very specific to their academic work. I talk to students about financial concerns. Student advisors look after a number of different funds on campus that are there to support students, and the main two, I suppose, we would see a lot of this year is students getting in touch about the Student Welfare Fund, which is a non-means tested fund for students who have found themselves in unexpected financial circumstances or unexpected financial difficulty, and the laptop loan scheme. So UCD has quite a few laptops that it can lend to students who might need a laptop to help them access online education this year. I can refer students and give advice on the specialist supports we have on campus, and also supports that might be available off campus too. And hopefully this is something your young adult never has to face or come in contact with, but if a student is facing, I suppose, comes across disciplinary issues and needs to go to a disciplinary board, I'm available to support them to talk about how UCD policies and procedures work, and I can accompany them either virtually or in person to a disciplinary hearing. So, and I think it's important to bring this up too, just so that everybody is aware of it. In the service that I offer to students, confidentiality is a big part of what I do and how I work. So, and that's part of kind of all of the UCD student advisors and what we do. So there's a UCD advisor confidentiality statement, which is that we are committed at every level and in all aspects of our service to provide a confidential service to all students who are seeking support. And what that means on a practical level is that I cannot disclose any information about a student or that a student has shared with me unless I have express permission from them. So I can't share with anybody if a student has been in contact with me already, and I can't talk about or share what we've talked about in confidence unless I have permission from that student. If you have any questions about it, there's a full statement with more information on the advisor website. Okay, so common transition issues that students may face in stage one. One would be the university environment, and again, I'm very conscious that this autumn is different to autumns in the past. UCD campus is very vibrant. It often has been in the past, very vibrant, very busy. There's a lot going on, and at the moment it does feel different to students. At the beginning of this year, your student might have taken part in a virtual campus tour with their peer mentor. And in the future, hopefully as soon as we get the green light to do so, we can give them a proper in-person campus tour. We're ready to go on that, but we just need to make sure that it is safe to do so first. But students often find that sometimes adjusting to UCD campus is a big step. Students could face difficulties in developing independent learning techniques and habits and study skills, because again, moving from secondary education to third level education is a really very genuinely significant step for them. There could be very different expectations that they're used to from what they were doing in the past, and it's a big adjustment to learning how to work in third level education and how to study and how to manage your time. And of course, additionally this year, there's an aspect of online education as well. Stage one students might be thinking an awful lot about the impact of leaving home for the first time, or in some cases, students might be staying at home when their peers might be leaving home, and that might be something very meaningful for them and have a real impact on their experience. And I'm also very conscious that there may be students who expected to move up to Dublin this year and might continue to live at home to study and be commuting a little bit or quite a bit, and that might have an impact on their life. And again, if that's something that they're finding kind of having a real effect on them, they're more than welcome to book in and have a chat with me about how to manage that and how that impacts their study and their life. Students can face personal challenges around, I suppose, the first time living away from home, roommate issues sometimes, living with people outside of their family, adapting to that, making new friends and keeping old. And again, this year, students are maybe not making friends in the way they would have in the past. Often students in past years they might make friends during Freshers Week or bump into somebody in between classes or have a chat. And again, that's not something that they might experience in the same way this year, but we're really encouraging students to get involved with clubs and societies in a virtual way. And then as soon as we're able to do so, to really try and introduce students in person when it's safe to do so. And also, students are coping with new challenges, and that could be a very exciting thing, but it can also really throw up some new experiences, and they have to learn to adapt and to deal with that. So if students are having difficulty or they have questions, and it's a very practical question that I might have to do with module registration, they can come to me and I may be able to answer it, or I could refer them on to colleagues in the Engineering and Architecture College office. And while we're working remotely, I might refer them through the Engineering and Architecture Student Connector, and you can see what that looks like there. Some students may wish to register with the UCD Access Centre and the Disability Service. So that's there to support students with a range of disabilities, including learning difficulties, long-term physical and mental health conditions. And it can help students who might need some extra time. Actually, Eva, yeah, thanks. Extra time or sitting exams elsewhere. And students do need to proactively contact the service to register and also go through an evaluation of the supports that they might need. If a student has questions about how to do that, they can go directly to the Disability Service, or they can come to me and we can talk through the registration together. So students coming into engineering, because there is quite a bit of maths involved, may find it's helpful to access the Maths Support Centre. It's physically based in the James Joyce Library. This trimester, they're offering online virtual support sessions, so students can book themselves in for those sessions, and they run Monday through Friday throughout the day. And the service is staffed by postgrad math students. So this is another resource that students might find really helpful this trimester or throughout their experience in UCD, throughout their time. Any UCD student can register themselves and take part in a virtual service, which is called Silver Cloud. And Silver Cloud is based on CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy principles. And it's there to, I suppose, give students skills to help them think and feel better and to manage anxiety or symptoms of depression or stress. And it is a very popular resource among UCD students, and it may be worth your student, your young adults, just being aware of it. If they don't need it now, it might be something that they find becomes helpful to them if they face a challenge, if they're very stressed at exam time, or if they find that they're facing difficulty along the way. So what happens if a student is sick or has to miss college due to personal reasons? Students would be asked in the first instance to fill out what's called an extenuating circumstances form, and the extenuating circumstances policy is there to support students who run into personal circumstances that, I suppose, interfere or impact on their study. And they can fill out an extenuating circumstances application online through SysWeb, which is part of our online application system, online student system. So evidence is required, for example, a doctor's note, or might be a notice from RIP.ie. And it is important that students try and fill out the form as soon as possible after they've missed an assessment or an exam, or they haven't been able to attend a class. Some instances we understand that it's just not possible to get it in 5 days. And in that case, the student could apply for retrospective extenuating circumstances, but as much as possible, we encourage students to get that application in on time. And if they need any guidance on this, or if they have questions, they can talk to the program office, or they can book in and have a chat with me and we can go through it together. So not included in extenuating circumstances, for example, could be being in a band, being in a job instead of class, or going on holidays. So this policy is very much around supporting students with, I suppose, unexpected circumstances, but there's some things that are not included within that. Okay, so what can you do? Again, again, I'm here to support students within their university life, but students have a very rich and complex life outside of university as well. And I would say first and foremost, listen to your students, listen to what they're going through if they have concerns, and continue to offer, I suppose, a listening ear and a support to them throughout their time at UCD. Do encourage your students to discuss issues with us as University of Staff, and suggest that they contact us. We are here to support them, to help them navigate their time as engineering students. So do let them know that they can put their hand up and ask for help, and that's what we're here for. That's what I'm here for, is to offer them support. I suppose also to take a deep breath. First year doesn't last forever. And fingers crossed, everything going on with COVID will not last forever. This time will pass. The vast majority of students do pass and continue on to second year. And I would say again, if a student is struggling, if they're finding that they're facing difficulties, do encourage them to reach out sooner rather than later so that they can access supports to help them. And my office, I have an open door policy. When I'm back in my office physically, my door will be open if I don't have a student in with me, and students can come in and just sit down for a chat if they need an appointment. At the moment, when we're working virtually, students can email me and I can set up an appointment with them. At the moment, I'm talking to students by Zoom, Google Hangouts, and by phone, so we can find a way to connect and have a chat. And I suppose finally, just to say, problems feel smaller when you share them. This is a poster from the yourmentalhealth.ie Little Things campaign. And it's actually a really lovely campaign with lots of suggestions on how to support your own mental health and the mental health of our young adults. But really, problems feel smaller when you share them. My door is always open. Do encourage your student to reach out, to have a chat, and to connect with the people around them to help them through the year ahead. So thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Julia. So I think we might have some questions. Caroline, Deborah, are there any questions that you wanted to deal with in an open group? You've been dealing with them as they've come through.
Yeah, we have been dealing with questions and answers as they come through, but there have been a couple of questions that I thought might be relevant to everybody. So if it's okay, I will just read out a couple of questions and see who's able to answer them. So we have a question in relation to COVID. There is no guarantee that an effective COVID vaccine will be available or taken up by adequate numbers within the next 12 to 18 months. What is UCD planning to enable increase in on-campus education over 2021? So I suppose they're concerned probably about spring and going into September next year.
So in UCD, our desire has always been to maximise face-to-face teaching and interaction, and that's what we were planning for in September. But obviously, what we do can only be done in terms of what the government allow us to do. And at the moment, the level of face-to-face interaction is relatively low, mostly because we were totally because we were told by government that was the level of interaction that we were allowed to have. We are hoping, and there are discussions ongoing with HEA regarding what might happen next trimester and what we might be able to do to increase that kind of face-to-face interaction as time goes on. You are totally correct that we don't know what's going to happen with the vaccine. I am very hopeful, given the positive news that that was put out by Pfizer earlier on today, that we are closer to a vaccine than we might have expected a few weeks ago, and that we will be able to look at how we can increase the face-to-face and return to normal. But you know, we are working within an environment where not all of the decisions are ours, that some of those decisions are from government and from NFET, etc. And we have to, like all other sectors of the economy and the country, comply with the instructions that are given to us from government about what we are or not allowed to do.
Great. There was just a question in relation to, are there any textbooks needed this year in stage one? Would anybody be aware?
So for different modules, students should be told what textbooks might be required. And generally speaking, they will also be, there is a function within Brightspace for module coordinators, for the lecturers on that program, to list the recommended reading, to list any kind of, it's rare, I think, but there may be the case in some modules where a textbook is absolutely required. And I think there was someone said it in one of the chat functions earlier, or in the questions and answers functions earlier on, some of those books are actually available electronically in the library, and there are more books available electronically in the library this year than in any other year, because publishers have been much more open to making those kind of things available in the library. So there may be for each module, tell your students to look at Brightspace to check. If they're in any doubt at all, or if they think they may have missed something, make contact with the module coordinator. As Julia was saying earlier on, making contact with staff early on if there's a problem is the best thing any student can do. And that's for the big problems where they might want to talk to a student advisor, for example, but also for the small ones, like working out what's happening in a module, or not being sure about a piece of assessment or a textbook, to contact the module advisor and ask, is there a book that I need to have for this course or for this module?
Great. There was a question from a parent in relation to there was an exam in maths that clashed with a lab in computer science. Now, Caroline, I think, is going to take up in looking into this further on behalf of that parent. I think it only affected some students last week in relation to there being a clash there. So she's going to look
okay. So that shouldn't happen. So that's we can work out what happened.
I have all the details, Deborah, so I'll contact both relevant module.
Thanks, Caroline.
Great.
Particular cohort, I have the CRN, so that should let me know exactly who's involved.
Great, thank you. I suppose a question that comes up year after year is in relation to either physics or chemistry. In this scenario, if a student has not done physics as a leaving cert subject and is struggling or is looking for options to try and catch up, should they contact directly the module coordinator, Professor Vladimir Lebaskin, in that scenario?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. The best starting point is always to contact the module coordinator, tell them that they're having problems. And, this is not unusual. We have this every single year, students coming in. It is a very rare student who has both physics and chemistry coming into first year. Most students are missing one of those subjects and can have some difficulties catching up. But as Julia was saying, most students do get through first year, and they will get through that module. But the best way of doing that is to contact that module coordinator, tell them that you're struggling, ask them, is there anything extra that you could read or look at that would help you get up to the right level for that subject.
Okay, and there are a couple of questions just in relation to module coordinators having different approaches of how they teach and how they offer their continuous assessment. And I think Caroline had replied to somebody say, the student, if they have any difficulties, to contact the module coordinator, but that some have different ways of communicating with their students. And I suppose it's the new environment that we're in generally.
Yeah, but I would say that even when you're on campus, you will find different approaches from lecturers in terms of how they teach and how they approach and how they assess. With some, for example, having lots of continuous assessment, some module coordinators saying everything's at the end, some having lots of group work. And when you're in university, not every module, not every way of teaching is going to be the one that you favor. But because we've got so many diverse module coordinators and lecturers, we've also got a huge diversity of students. And so the important thing is to offer a wide range of teaching approaches, because then everyone will experience something that they enjoy or something that is good and positive for them. And everyone will probably have some experiences which may not be absolutely perfect for them. But yeah, I think, as Deborah said, I know I'm going to keep on saying it, module coordinator is the best port of call for any kind of difficulty with a particular module. But if you don't get anywhere there, or you have difficulties and it's not there, you can come to the program office, the student advisor, and others as well, if you don't feel that you're getting anywhere.
Great. I'm just going to have a quick look at the Q&A to see if there's anything else in the last couple of minutes or so. I think so
there's a question about feedback. So we do collect feedback on all modules to that parent, both now and in normal times. We always do, and that feedback is reviewed and looked at, and changes are made to modules. We also have very, very active quality review systems in place for all our modules, and our programs are accredited, so they're always looked at by professional bodies as well. So everything we do is constantly being looked at, constantly being reviewed, and constantly being checked.
Great. Caroline, was something in particular that you...
There's two in the chat there now. One is to do with maths, the other one is to do with recording lectures.
Okay. I don't seem to have that. Would you mind just...
You lost the chat, have you?
Yeah, I seem to have lost. Would you mind just raising that then? Or...
I'll just paste it into the... oh, can I post a question, yeah?
Or if you just tell us what the question was that came from the chat, you need to address it now.
The problem with maths exam is there was no time mentioned. My daughter became very anxious as a result, plus has difficulty in posting screenshots. There should have been an exam for less marks to get them used to it, as done in electronics. Maths was 30%. Should not have such problems, tough enough as it is.
Okay, so it seems to be an issue with the time in terms of a particular exam, and it being the first time that the students experienced conducting an exam in this way. So maths is outside of our college, it's in a different college, but we can follow up to see was this a particular issue, Caroline, and maybe look into whether there was a wider feeling of discontent among students or other students had similar difficulties as well. Okay, thanks, Caroline.
That's just, yeah, we know which maths module that is. Then there's another one. Recording lectures would be really helpful. Dropping connections is a feature. If lecture is not recorded, the opportunity is lost. That's a bright space issue, really.
Okay. I'm going to add, I know David is here. David, are you aware if most lectures are being recorded? I had thought that most lectures were being recorded as well as delivered live.
Yes, indeed. Eva, I thought our plan was certainly to record everything to facilitate later viewing and reviewing. There can sometimes be issues with the quality of the recordings, but I think it's just a matter of reminding everybody that that recordings should be made available to students afterwards.
Yes. Yeah, so they should all be available. If there's anything that's not available, maybe let us know as a parent or as a student, and we can check. But they should all be available afterwards and should be all being recorded. I'm looking in the chat now. I don't see.
I just have a question here, Eva. Thanks. We understand the weighting on continuous assessment versus exams. So I suppose it really
so it depends on each module. Yeah. So within that what I was saying to you beforehand, for each student, they should be able to see a module descriptor for every single module that they have. And that module descriptor will include a breakdown of the assessment and how that assessment, the percentage of the assessment that is given to continuous and the percentage that is given to an exam. So there's no way that I can't say to you, oh, across the whole program, there's X amount on continuous and Y amount on exam, because it differs for every module, but the information is available to the students for each and every module that they take. So they should be able to see that very clearly.
Yeah.
I see a message also about internet connectivity. As you were saying earlier, lectures should be recorded. So if there's a drop in internet connectivity, a student should be able to see that lecture afterwards. If they're not, or if there are any issues with that, we'd urge them to contact us so that we can check that. And with the maths one, I can see a question coming in there saying that some aren't followed in maths. Caroline, it was with the maths, we have a couple of questions that we need to follow up on. That's outside of our college, but we will follow up on them with our colleagues in another college on maths. Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of uploading notes prior to lectures, again, it's different for each module coordinators. Some module coordinators prefer not to upload them before the lecture because uploading notes, so we know this from experience, both when we're physically present at lectures and when we're online, students don't always turn up for the lecture if everything's uploaded beforehand and they can download notes. So it is a case-by-case approach, and different lecturers will have different approaches in terms of ensuring there is attendance at lectures, and that may sometimes mean not uploading notes until after the lecture.
Sorry, David.
I just make one very brief point that because of the late start to the academic season, this particular trimester is unusually shortened, and so hopefully things will be a lot more straightforward after Christmas when we have additional weeks on normal timetable.
So there's a question there on students are required to attend labs, etc. Could it be coordinated that the student do not have to attend Dublin a number of days per week? That's to do with the timing of labs. So that's a difficult one for us to
yes, so that's not an issue that we as a college have the ability to make that decision. It was a university decision to maintain the timetable as it normally is, rather than to divide it up per days for students to be in on particular days. But I do understand the concern and acknowledge it. At the moment, it's not going to change for this trimester. I'm unsure about the second trimester.
They're asking if there's questions there about the lectures for maths not being recorded.
Yes, I saw, Caroline, that's one we want to follow up on. I was just saying a few minutes ago, there's a few different things we want to follow up on with maths. Yeah, the recording of the lectures and maybe that exam as well. There's a few people are saying there wasn't
not enough time, and then the time clash with the other modules, other labs students were doing. Yeah.
Okay. There's some questions about support in physics regarding special supports. There isn't a physics support centre in the college. We've never had one before in the university. Again, I can see that there's some concerns. It tends to be, it's not a majority of students who tend to look for it. Neil, I don't know if you have any comments on that as Stage 1 coordinator. You've experience of Stage 1 over the years, that most of our students do get through, our students get through that physics. Some will struggle, but they do get through, and we haven't ever had a physics support centre there.
The physics module is they use an online a book, a Wiley online, so there is actually quite good online resources to back up what the lecturer is doing in class. So it might be a case that perhaps the students who are struggling maybe don't have access or haven't, if you like, paid for that book, that textbook. But it might be a good investment if that's the case, because they might discover that there's all sorts of good stuff online that might help them to understand the material a bit better.
Yeah. Yes. In terms of the quality assurance on online, this is our second trimester being online. We moved online in the middle of the second trimester last year, and we did do some feedback on looking at the quality of that online teaching, including collecting feedback from students and consultation with students at a university level. So yes, there is specific quality assurance in place for online delivery as well. Okay. Sorry, I'm looking through these questions.
I see. There's just one below
that.
So
these are quite specific, yeah. Length of recorded lectures, okay. In terms of specifics, I'm not sure what you mean by having a specific person to raise the length of the lectures with. Engineering is a very intense program. If they were face-to-face here, they would be generally with us 9 to 5 a day. Again, having spent many hours on Zoom and meetings, I know that being on Zoom can be more demanding and tiring for students. But unfortunately, we're trying as much as possible to keep to the normal timetable, and that's because scheduling labs, etc., for 360 odd students and lectures for 360 odd students is very, very difficult if we start to mess around with that timetable too much. As I said, lectures should be recorded, notwithstanding that we need to follow up on the maths situation to find out where they're not being recorded. So if a student needs to take a break and can't sit for 5 or 6 hours watching lectures, because the lectures are recorded, they can actually space out the watching of them or the engagement in those lectures, possibly in a way that they may not have been able to do so before when they had face-to-face contact. Campus accommodation, okay. Yes, I mean, someone has asked here about if someone is on campus accommodation, living on campus accommodation, could we look at putting them in contact with other students who are also living on campus, because it can be quite lonely. And Julia, I was wondering, maybe that's something we could look at. You know, obviously there's GDPR issues, we can't just release to people who's living here or not, but maybe if we can get agreement from different students, we could start putting students in contact with each other if they're living on campus.
Absolutely, certainly, and I think we'd have to look into the, like as Aoife said, the GDPR side of it. I do know that the Students' Union are very conscious that there are students living on campus, and it's not, I suppose, perhaps the campus experience they were first expecting. And my understanding is that they're looking into ways of connecting students in a safe fashion, face-to-face or in person, or I suppose just looking at improving on-campus supports for students at the moment. So I haven't heard an update on that, but I know they're thinking an awful lot about it and really working to find ways to do that. And we can talk about how to do that in engineering as well. So thank you for raising that.
Okay, then we have a question about one of the comments I'd made about we teach and that we expect the students to do the learning, and asking to explain a bit more. So to try to explain that, if we think about a second level class where you might have somewhere between 20 to 30 students in a class and the teacher is teaching, the teacher will be able to see if someone doesn't get it in a class, or if there's an issue, or if there's a difficulty, and is probably able to engage with students on a more one-to-one basis. If you're teaching a lecture with 360 students, that ability to see if someone's falling behind or if there's a difficulty is harder. So generally speaking, the lecturer is giving the information and is expecting students to take that on board and study it and learn it themselves, to engage in independent learning. I also mean by that they're more involved in doing their own pieces of coursework, their laboratory, their group work. Now in engineering, the advantage that they have over other maybe disciplines is that we have a lot more engagement with the students than you might have in an arts course or a social science course, because we have quite a lot of coursework. And as I said, we have a lot of lectures, which sometimes students complain about. But the plus side of that is that we have more engagement and interaction with them than would normally be the case in a lot of other university disciplines. But at the end of the day, as they come into university, they are adults now rather than school children. So they do take on a greater level of personal responsibility in terms of having to engage with the materials, in terms of having to learn them, in terms of having to notify someone when they're having a problem or a difficulty, because it won't be caught in the same way as it would be in a school situation. With the best in the world, it just can't be. And so they need to actually engage in that learning themselves and get more ownership of their own learning. And they'll see that becoming more and more the case as they move from first year up until fourth or fifth year, where there's far more emphasis on independent learning and taking on board projects, for example, culminating in their final year where they write a thesis on a research area that they're working with. And of course, they'll have a supervisor there that they interact with, but it's still their piece of work and their piece of coursework, which is quite different to anything they will have experienced up till now, especially in an Irish education system where everything is very prescribed and very detailed and very based on a leaving cert curriculum and maximising points and very strategic. And that's part of growing up in a university system for the students. So it's really important that they take ownership from that from day one. We are there to help them in whatever way we can, but they start to take ownership of their own learning in a much bigger way than they ever have before. I hope that explains it.
I was just going to respond. I can see a parent raised something around sports activities. It was just to say that we have to follow public health guidelines, and we don't know specifically what happens next post level 5. I would imagine that UCD Sport will follow whatever public health guidelines are put in place. But I would say for any students who are finding it difficult to sit in front of the computer and need to get up and move around, I know UCD Sport are doing free online sports classes through Facebook. They're doing live interactive classes for as long as we are under level 5 restrictions, and they're running them several times a week. So if your student, if your young adult is really looking to get out and move and finding it difficult and missing the kind of the gym experience, I would encourage them to get onto the UCD Sport page and get involved in some of those activities, and just get up and move around a little bit to help with mental health and concentration. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and just in relation to the residences, there's someone else also made a comment that for those students living at home, there might be something that we could do about trying to get students to interact. So that might be something we need to think about and look at after this. Yeah.